Testing in the SAP Function Builder was successful, so now I want to develop a .NET application that calls the same function. For this demo, I'll use Visual Studio 2012, and I'll code the application with both the SAP .NET Connector and ERP Connect. They both work fine for calling remote functions, but the coding required is a bit different. For this test, I'll use Windows Forms because it provides a better display of the results for the demo. Now I'm going to create a new Windows Forms application called getFlightListDemo. First, I need to add a couple of buttons. The first one I'll call just NCO. And the second one I'll call ERP Connect. I'll start out by coding behind the SAP .NET Connector button, but before that, I'll go ahead and go into the code and just add the references that I need. ERP Connect and SAP NCO. And now I'll add using SAP.middleware.connector. When I'm using ERP Connect, I'll just type out the full class names so there's no confusion between which is coming from which tool. And before I go any farther, I'll go back and add a data grid view to this form. And this is to display the results of the tests. So I'll just anchor that. The SAP .NET Connector allows several different ways to provide the SAP connection parameters. I'm using the simplest method, the RFC-config parameters class. I'll create an instance of the class, then I'll add the connection parameters to it. And I'm just going to paste these from another application to save some time. App Server Host is the SAP host name, the name of the server, or virtual server in this case, that runs SAP. System number is assigned during the installation of SAP. User ID and password are the same user ID and password that I've been using. So for this demo, I'm actually using just a normal user ID. The client number is next, followed by the language, EN for English, and NSP, which is the SAP system name, and I don't think that really matters in this case, but I've included it just for completeness. Then immediately following it, I'm creating an RFC destination object using the RFC destination manager class, calling its getDestination method to create the RFC destination object from the parameters. Next, I need to create the RFC repository object. The RFC repository object is actually part of the RFC destination object I just created, but I'm going to pull it out just to make it conceptually a little easier to understand what I'm doing. Next, I'll call the create function method on the repository object and store the results in an IRFC function object, and this is what will be used to actually call the SAP function. Next, I will invoke the function, passing it the RFC destination object. And normally you'd handle exceptions for this call, but I'll pass on that for now, just to keep it simple. Now we need to retrieve the results. You may recall the results are in table flight list, so I'll use the IRFC table class to create an object. The IRFC table object will be created for the specific table, flight list, using the getTable method call on the function object. And I want to display the results in the data grid view. But one thing about this IRFC table interface is that it doesn't support data binding. I can fix that by creating an IRFC table view object. and I'll use the default view property as the data source for my data grid view control. I have to cast that as I support table view. Now I will assign the data source for my data grid view to table view. So now I'll try to build it. And the build succeeded, so I'll just run it. And here we can see the results coming up in the data grid view. As I scroll across the results, I can see that price doesn't display properly in the data grid view. If I look at it in the debugger, I could see the prices there. So maybe there's a bug somewhere in the SAP view code, but it did retrieve the data.